If you're writing a novel right now, but it feels kind of unstable, like your protagonist isn't fully landing, your scenes feel like they're missing something underneath, and every time you get feedback from a reader, it's that same kind of frustrating feedback that, maybe they're not connecting with it very well, then this video is for you. Because the thing is, most committed writers who are deep into their manuscript, they don't need more craft advice. They need a specific system, a specific sequenced system that's going to build the emotional foundation of their characters once and for all. And once they do that, the rest of the writing truly will actually begin to flow. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the exact 3-week framework that I use with my students inside the Emotional Storytellers Intensive. This framework will take them from flat, uncertain, and I don't know why this isn't working, to characters who are so psychologically real and emotionally alive that they feel like they actually have a heartbeat. In 3 weeks, not 3 months, 3 weeks. Now, before we go on, let me clarify. The Emotional Storytellers Intensive, we actually do about 12 weeks of planning, but that covers the entire story. So I'm going to go deep here into specifically how we do the framework for your characters, because that's what we've been focusing this last few videos on. But at the end, I'm going to say a few words about the entire program as well. Okay, so it'll make sense when we get there. So before we get into that, please tell me in the comments, are you in the middle of a manuscript right now, or maybe in the middle of the planning phase, or somewhere else? I'm interested to know where you're starting from, because this framework is going to be relevant wherever you are in the process. Now, before I walk you through the 3 weeks, I want to make sure that you're thinking about this the right way. When most writers hear something like, oh, your character needs work, they kind of cringe. They might brace themselves a little bit, because what they're thinking is that it's going to be more worksheets, more backstory documents, and not something that's going to actually help them get the writing done. But this is not that. I want you to think of these 3 weeks less like homework and more like pouring the foundation for a house. Once you do it and do it right, everything that built on top of it is more stable. Every scene, every decision, even every revision. You're not going to be constantly going back to wonder whether your character would do this or say that. You're not going to be second guessing yourself. You're going to know because you've built the architecture. And here's the thing. Authors who skip this do not save time. They either put out a subpar book if they just don't care to do this, or they spend time rewriting and reworking scene after scene after scene because they never bothered to nail down the foundation. So those 3 weeks, they will save you months, guaranteed. All right, so we're going to go week by week. And I want to be clear, I'm not going to give you every single detail here that you get inside the Emotional Storytellers Intensive, because there is probably around 3 hours worth of instruction across all of those 3 weeks. And obviously, I'm not going to fit that into a 15-minute video here. But by the time you're finished with this video, I want you to leave with a very clear picture of what these 3 weeks look like and what you're building toward. All right, so in week 1, you're going to set your story foundation, which means you're going to figure out your central conflict and your overarching story theme. Now, you may be thinking, what does that have to do with character? Actually, a lot, okay? Now, the first thing we have to do is figure out your central conflict. And the main reason that I include this is because I noticed that a lot of authors who come to the program, they think they have their central conflict nailed down. And this, honestly, this is a little bit more external. It's like what the character is going to be fighting most directly against in the climactic moment. And a lot of people, it's not that they don't know what the conflict is for their character, but often they haven't nailed it down in great detail, or they might have more than one conflict and they don't realize that they're actually writing a trilogy or a series. And so they're focusing on too many different pieces, and you need to nail down the conflict for this book, okay? Even if you're writing a series or a trilogy or multiple, it doesn't really matter, and we'll go over how to figure that out in the course, but you need to nail down the central conflict, okay? So that's number 1. And yes, that does affect the character because we need to know what it is that they are struggling against. If that is not well defined, you don't have a story. You don't even have a premise. You need to know what the conflict is, okay? So that's the first thing we're going to go over in week 1. The second thing is theme, and this is the thing that really surprises people. This is one of those things, like I said in Carrie's video, that people go, wow, why have I never thought of that before? Okay, theme is so poorly taught in our industry. It's like start writing and the theme will organically emerge. Now, I do believe that you can do that with what I call mini themes. You're going to be working with more than one theme in your novel eventually. And as you write, certain things will surface that maybe you didn't plan for. I mean, that's part of writing, that's part of being inspired, right? And those are really fun. But again, we're talking about the cohesion of the story and the fact that you need to have an end point that you're working toward, or else your story is going to feel like it meanders and like it's not very well connected, like a whole bunch of events that are just like daisy chained together but aren't actually affecting one another. You don't want that, okay? Your theme is inextricably connected to your character's transformation. Okay, so that's why I include it first. The way in which your character transforms, the transformation that they go through, is going to be almost the same thing as the theme. It's going to be stated a little bit differently, but remember, I'm going to quote Vogler. This is going to be written on my gravestone, okay? Story is a metaphor for a journey that leads to change. So the point of the story, as I've said already several times, is the transformation. Therefore, the overarching story theme is also about the transformation, okay? So that's why we are doing these first. We need to get very clear on the bedrock foundations of your story, of what you are trying to say. And we're going to spend week 1 doing that. In week 2, we're going to start to establish your protagonist's identity. This is the wound, the belief, and the transformation. So if you've been watching all of the videos in this playlist, you're already pretty familiar with these. The difference is that in the course, we're going to go a lot deeper. We're going to talk about them in a more granular way. And I'm going to give you the questions you need to ask and journal on in order to figure out what it looks like for your character. Okay, so we're going to dive deep in how to figure out what your character wound is, how to come up with what the limiting belief is that they have that rises out of that, and how it's going to affect their transformation. The other thing is that depending on how you conceived of your story, it's going to look a little different for everyone. Maybe you know what the transformation looks like in the climactic moment, but you don't know where it came from. You don't know what the wound is or what the limiting belief is. Well, I will teach you based on what you do have to kind of reverse engineer and figure that out. On the other hand, if you know what the character wound is, but you don't know what the transformation looks like, I'll teach you how to do that too. So depending on where you're at, we will be able to figure this out for you and your story, okay? We're also going to go over some things that you need to understand about the transformation, things like the reflection, the transformative moment, you know, the ways that they move further away and then further toward the transformation, all of that. So all of it was stuff that I couldn't necessarily cover in these videos, but we will be going through that in great detail in week 2 so that you will have a very good foundation, very detailed, and a very good handle on it. You know, I want you to understand this not just in a general way or a vague way, but with authority so that you can sit down and just speak it. If someone says to you, what transformation does your character go through? And you can't come up with that, or you have to sit and think about it and go, well, in the first chapter, and then, no. I want you to be able to just say it because you know it so well. And I want you to be able to nail down every single part of it with definity, with authority on your character. That's what we're going to be doing in week 2, is figuring that out. And once you have that, again, when I explain that the limiting belief is what drives your character's decisions and their choices, I understand that that can start to sound a little overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have so much to keep track of, and in every single scene, I'm going to have to be constantly thinking about this. No, that's actually not the case. Once you nail it down and you know it really well, when you sit down to write, you just slip into that character's perspective. Your brain will do it automatically, okay? So it's not as hard as it sounds like it is, but only if you nail it down first and really, really solidly, okay? And then in week 3 is when we're going to do things that are a little bit more external for the character, okay? This is where we're going to do the character Bible. We're going to establish voice, personality, and all of the consistency you need, okay? This is where everything gets concrete and specific and usable on the page. So when you have a vague idea in your mind of these things, you may, technically know them, but it's really hard to know how to actually get them onto the page. But if you bring them forward and actually state them and type them somewhere, as in your character Bible, then it actually becomes a lot easier to know what to write on the page, okay? So it's like, it's not just my character grew up in a fishing village. It is, this is what my character thinks because of that. This is the way she approaches the world. This is the way she sees things. Here are some fishing metaphors and language that she uses constantly that shows that she comes from that. And then you know exactly how to write her voice on the page. You know exactly how she's going to react in various emotional situations because you've already planned it and put it down in your character Bible. Okay, so we're going to dig deep and I'm going to give you a list of exactly what you need to plan, exactly what you need to know for your character. I'm going to give you the structure of the character Bible, and you're just going to go through and get everything planned and written, and then you'll have it moving forward. Okay, so we're going to do the personality construction, the voice construction, the character Bible. That's the one that includes descriptions and emotional reactions, insecurities, flaws, all of that. So you will have a Bible for your character to move forward with, and you will also be very familiar with their personality, how they react under stress and various situations that are emotional, and the words and phrases you're going to use to convey their unique voice. So by the end of week 3, you're not just going to have a psychologically complete character, you will have that. You're going to have a character, though, that you can actually write confidently, consistently, specifically. And you're going to be able to do that across however many chapters, drafts, and revisions your story requires. So give me a hell yes in the comments if that's the level of clarity and confidence that you would like to have on your characters, because that's exactly what this 3-week process will deliver for you. So let's talk about what you will specifically have at the end of this first 3 weeks of the course, okay? Because I want you to feel the completeness of it. You're going to have a central conflict that gives your story a clear destination. You're going to have a story theme that lines up with your character's transformation internally, so that every plot event you write, every chapter, every scene is aimed at the emotional payoff that you are building toward. You have a wound that explains who the character is, a limiting belief that makes every choice they make feel psychologically inevitable, a transformation that is specific, earned, and built from the inside out, a character Bible that makes you consistent across the entire manuscript, a personality that you can rely on under pressure, and a voice that is distinctly and unmistakably theirs. Okay, so can you see that this is not a character worksheet, right? It is the internal architecture of a character who feels real. And it's the foundation that every other part of your story gets built on. But here's the other thing that I want you to understand. This is not just for the protagonist. Once you have this down, you can do this for every significant character in your story, meaning the villain or antagonist, the love interest, the characters that are part of subplots, and the side characters who have any kind of relevancy or impact on the story. Now, of course, not every single character in your story is going to be a point of view character with a wound. Some of them are more flat, some of them are more secondary and don't need that level of thought. But every character who does need that level of thought, you will be able to craft them this way, and you'll be able to do it pretty easily once you have the sequence down. Okay, so like I said, everything I just walked you through was the first 3 weeks of the program. And I want you to understand what's waiting for you on the other side of those 3 weeks, because the character work is the foundation, and it is probably the most important part of your story to plan and plan well, but it's also not the whole thing. After we build your protagonist very deeply those first 3 weeks, we're going to go through every other element of story with that same level of psychological depth and intentionality. So, for example, we're going to build your villain or antagonist. And we're not talking about building a flat villain with an evil laugh and evil goals and a dramatic backstory, okay? That's just not cutting it these days. Our readers need something that is more three-dimensional, that has more of a dichotomy than that. They need something that feels real and not just cartoonish. So we're going to be building a villain with their own wound, their own limiting belief, and going through the logic of what their evil plan is and why they are butting heads with your protagonist. It's those things that make them feel like a real person who are making terrible choices, but for completely understandable reasons. They become a mirror to your protagonist. And that dynamic, something that I call hero-villain entanglement, is what creates the most devastating and most memorable villains in fiction. And we're going to do that, and we're going to do it deliberately. After that, we're going to go through the full internal arc. Now, the pieces that I've given you, the character wound and the limiting belief and the transformation, those are sort of the bookends, kind of like this, of your internal arc. But there are quite a few steps in between, logical things, psychological pivot points that you need to be aware of and to build into your story. And if you do all of the pivot points, right, all of these psychological and emotional points correctly and in the right sequence, it is going to be the thing that builds the catharsis that your reader will have. So you want to have that emotional payoff. You want them to be having big emotions when they're reading the end of your story. And the way to do that is through nailing this internal arc. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. We're also going to go through character relationships because most stories out there are not about a single character wandering around by themselves, right? There are romantic relationships, there are platonic relationships, friends, familial relationships, maybe coworkers, all kinds of things. And I'm going to show you how to build those. You have to figure out what the function of that relationship is because not all relationships in fiction can be built using um, the same kind of template because, they're different. How do you want this relationship to function? And based on that functionality, here's what you need to include. And I'll show you exactly what those things are so that you can tailor them to your story and make sure that any important relationships that you are including, that the reader not only is aware of them and feels them deeply, but feels what you want them to feel about that relationship, okay? It doesn't really work if you want a very loyal and loving relationship, and for some reason it comes across on the page as flat, okay? And it doesn't help if somebody really likes this relationship, if the readers are going, okay, we like this person, and you're going, no, 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 I want you to hate that person. Like, this is not supposed to be a healthy relationship. You need to know how to get that across on the page, okay? So that's what we're going to go through. And of course, we are going to cover plotting because as much as I complain about how all external templates are based on plot, and you shouldn't be planning that first. You need to plan your emotional arc first because it is the foundation. And I 100% stand by that. At the same time, obviously, plot is important to story. It's just not the thing that should come first or be the foundation, right? Once you have your internal arc mapped, then the plot actually becomes a lot easier. Things will just start to click into place because your internal arc, which is what dictates your character's choices and their motivations, is what drives the external plot. And the way that I do plot is also based on human transformation. It looks slightly different than the internal, but it's still loosely based on that. Okay, so even your plot events can feel transformative if you do them correctly. We are going to deep dive into every one of those plot points and make sure that you understand them deeply, as in what their functionality is, how it ties to human transformation, and why it's important that you make sure you hit those beats in your story, because without them, the reader's going to get bored. Then we go into scene work. Now, obviously, this is the most practical. This is where people really love the program and it really all comes together for them, okay? Because I'm going to show you how to take everything that we have already planned, your internal arc, your plot, your relationships, all of it, and put it together into a cause and effect scene arc. This is how we use emotion and motivation to drive the story forward. It's how every single scene and every single choice the character makes feels inevitable and authentic to who they are. And it's how your ending feels like destiny. It feels like there is no other way that this story could have ended. So this is the most perfect and satisfying ending for your reader. And then after that, we're going to go into what I call the addictive scene formula, where I'm going to show you how to write every single scene so that you are hooking the reader deeply and keeping them turning pages, okay? We are actually intentionally writing a page turner. And it's not by throwing in a random plot twist or by making sure that each of your chapters end on a cliffhanger. You can do those things where it serves your story, but we're not going to rely on them to keep the readers reading. We are going to rely on the emotion. We are going to rely on the psychology of the transformation that's happening. And that is what's going to keep them genuinely hooked, genuinely emotionally invested in what's going on. Okay. So notice that none of this is me telling you what to write in your story. The story that you've come up with is already perfect. It is already your unique genius soul story. I'm just telling you how to position it so that your reader feels the emotion of it and cannot stop reading. Okay? So that is what my Emotional Storytellers Intensive is built to do. And if you're a committed author, if you're in the trenches with your story and it matters to you and you know it deserves to be told and told well, this is a program that I have built for you. So if you want to know more about ESI, what's in it, what the experience looks like, whether it might be a right fit for where you're at, then I'm going to leave the link in the description. My promise is that if you do the work and follow the program the way that it's set up, you can get your first draft finished in 6 months or less. The first time through, it's probably going to take more like 6 months, but once you get this process down, that's when you can start churning out novels much more quickly. And saying it that way, churning out novels, I know that it instantly creates a cringe because people think of novels that are just not very high quality, that the author clearly threw together, but once you have this framework, you don't have to worry about that anymore. You'll get faster at it, just like you get better at anything you do over and over again. It's just a muscle that you need to build, right? But this framework automatically gets all of the high quality in there, okay? It gets the story told, it gets the emotion in there, it gets the backstory, it gets the psychology, it gets all of it. So you can truly write your books much more quickly and still have them be very high quality and still have them be potential bestsellers that readers are just going to fall in love with, okay? Now, if you have been watching the last few videos in this playlist, I want to leave you with this. You already have the framework for your characters. I've given it to you here. You know you're missing three pieces, and with not having those three pieces, your characters are going to feel flat. You know what the mistakes are that are making your characters feel emotionally hollow. You know what a character Bible is and why you need one. You've seen what is possible when other authors have followed this particular framework and gotten amazing results. And now you have the 3-week roadmap to writing stellar characters. The how, the specific questions you ask, the exact next process to follow, the feedback, the support to make sure that you're building this right for your specific story, that's what you will get inside the Emotional Storytellers Intensive. But the what is yours. You earned it by making it to the end of this playlist. So now go use it. All right, so do me a favor and drop me a comment and tell me what the biggest shift has been for you in how you're thinking about writing your characters. If you think that the Emotional Storyteller Intensive will serve you, I invite you to come join us in there, and I cannot wait to see you and the amazing story that you're creating. And if not, then take what you have learned from this and go write your soul story. Either way, make sure that you are having fun and that you are finding joy in your writing. All right, and I will see you in the next video.